Well, what's up, everybody in the Cityline family and beyond? It is the Beyond Sunday podcast. Yes, it is. It is episode 7.
Episode 7.
Season 1. And we are
we
on and popping.
I ain't even gonna lie. I was gonna say a different number for sure.
Yeah, no, this is still...
You added them.
It's 7. I'm pretty sure it's 7.
I don't know.
It's episode 7,
right?
Episode 7.
If it's not
It's 7 for
7,
sure.
we're going to go with 7 because 7's a biblical number.
But that's the number of completion. Is this our last episode?
This is not our last episode in
Hallelujah.
season 1, but we are going to go to 12.
Ooh,
like the
another Bible
disciples,
number.
Another Bible number.
And the
So
tribes.
there's 12 episodes.
And the
in
bowls of judgment. I'm just kidding.
one season
All right.
Okay, so 12 episodes completes the season. Is that what
completes
we're
the
saying?
season, and then you take like
You're
a
learning
break,
this in
and
real
then you
time.
do another season.
I didn't even know that. That's word up.
Hey, yeah, hey, listen, this is all new to us. We are literally building the plane while it's flying.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
so
the best
it's
way
a
to
lot of
build a
fun.
plane, I'm told.
Yeah, I mean, it's how we're building it, so it's good. Welcome, everybody that is tuning in. We say all the time on the Beyond Sunday podcast, hey,
it's Wednesday.
And you know what they say on Wednesday? Happy Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday. It's also What's Up Wednesday, because what's up with Wednesday? You got it. It's the Beyond Sunday podcast.
That's
right. That's what we're doing. We're here. We're hanging out.
here.
The couches are full today, and I'm excited about it. And so let's not forget that this podcast is brought to you by
Zero
Cityline
sponsors. Oh,
Church.
yes.
Yeah, zero sponsors. However, Cityline Church.
Yes, right.
The perfect place for imperfect people where the party don't stop.
It never does.
Always going, always moving and grooving.
There's a C.
Seize up.
Yes, that's right. I got it right here. Boom.
Yeah.
Represent for
There's
those
also
that
a
are
hole in
tuning
it.
in and watching.
How?
That's right.
You know what? You know what? You're back.
See, look, I know I'm back.
Hey, I was
so
gonna,
y'all know what's up.
We were gonna give props to Joshua for making it back to the couch.
Look at that.
But I'm looking at this.
Bro, his shirt is singing the same song that the angels sing at the throne room. Holy, holy, holy.
Holy. Nothing but holy. I mean, my guy. I don't know.
That's a
what's
garment
going
of
on,
praise
bro.
if I've ever seen one.
I mean, but is it a garment even? I mean, it's like.
I got guys. Everything I wear gets clowned. I got socks with my dogs on them.
Hey,
You know what
yeah.
I'm saying?
This is. I mean, I appreciate the fact that you came ready for the podcast today.
You know,
No,
and he's
brother,
back.
you already know.
Holy unto the Lord.
Holy.
Josh shows up right here, ready to go. It's
That's
good
for sure.
stuff. I love it. Well,
Thanks, man.
Since we're doing the introductions, if you did not recognize the voice, Joshua Mann is back on the couch today. Everybody, give him some love.
Some love.
Thank you.
I know you've been
Love.
in the room for the last few weeks, but we missed having you on the couch with us.
Thank you, bro. I laughed a lot.
Yeah, it was good
It
times.
was a good time. It was a good time. I was in the broadcast room. That's where we produced the episodes.
That's right.
I'm just in there all by my lone self, just laughing it up.
Hey, well, thanks for coming back
Thanks,
and joining
man.
us, and
Thanks.
we trust the laughter will continue,
It shall.
either with you or at your expense.
It shall.
Either way, it's
Probably
gonna
that,
happen.
because I feel like there are a lot of jokes y'all been holding in.
You
So-
showed your holy sleeve.
Yeah, I was
Nobody
gonna say
knew.
nothing.
I
was
am
gonna
what
say
I am.
nothing. Yeah,
We didn't know. We didn't see his holy sleeve.
I am
And then he
what
just
I am.
said,
But Joshua is back. We also got myself, Pastor Jack. We got Pastor Troy. We also got Pastor Linda, as always, in the building. Quality control. She is
Love
in
you,
the
Mom.
house.
and we
we've
got DJ CC on the ones and
DJ
twos.
CC on the ones and twos this week, switching it up in the broadcast
you.
room. We love her
Gave
so
me a
much.
break.
It's good stuff.
And-
I'm excited about the podcast today because we have a very special guest.
No,
Yes.
that's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about Ronda Love. Yes, give it up for Ronda
Yes.
Love.
Some love. Give some
She-
love.
Give some love to Ronda,
Ronda Love.
right?
Honored.
She is a leader at Cityline Church. She is on the prayer team
That's right.
here at Cityline Church. I'm telling you, she's the real deal.
Like
And-
Holyfield?
For real.
Like Holyfield. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm just telling you, if you don't know Rhonda, you need to know Rhonda. She's good people. And fun fact about Rhonda that I've learned in getting to know her.
Oh, man.
Is this true or not? You've had, I don't know, some experience with the NFL in some sort of way. Is it true? Word on the street is in the inaugural season of the Seattle Seahawks, one Miss Ronda Love tried out to be a Seahawks cheerleader.
What?
Yes.
What?
I tried out.
That's sick. What?
Everybody.
What?
That's right.
You got
Sports
some moves?
extraordinaire.
You got some moves?
Yo.
Yeah, I do.
Still got
I was their cheerleader in high school.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then a few years later, my cousin said, let's go and try out, for the Seahawks. And there's a cheer squad and a dance squad. And I tried out. I made the first cut.
Mm-hmm.
And I did not go back for the second round.
You just said no?
I just
what
said
happened?
no.
But why?
I don't know. I had a kid by then too.
Oh,
I was
okay.
and I just was setting priorities and all of
Seems
the
like a
things.
good idea.
Yeah, but they were still paying you back in those days.
Yeah.
It was like $25 a game.
A whole
or something.
$25
Yeah.
a game?
Hey, that goes far. Then, not now.
Not me. Like I
I'm
view
like-
like money and like currency of like coffee cups now. So
Yeah.
like how many coffees can I get with $25?
With inflation, that's at least 2.
Bro,
That's like
Americans
2.
would try
It's
anything
2.
but the metric system.
I'm gonna. I
2.25 cups of coffee in this inflation.
I went
right?
to an unnamed coffee shop in Long Beach the other day, and tell me why this coffee was $9. $9
For bean water,
bean water, bro.
That is
miss me, bro.
That's intense.
I'm gonna get some Folgers.
Instant.
Yeah,
Maxwell House.
instant boil the
Maxwell
water.
House.
Maxwell House.
Bro, you remember Maxwell House? You know, I used to think when I was a kid, Maxwell House. You
We
win
made it.
your house, $5,000 every month, and I would go to my dad and be like, "Dad, we gotta buy Maxwell House because then maybe we can win $5,000." It said so on the TV.
No lie.
No lie.
TV's never lied to us.
It didn't then, bro. I knew that
5,000
song like the back
cans
of my
Maxwell House.
Yeah.
$5,000 every month.
You still
Get
remember
your
that.
something at Maxwell House, and then
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Did
I
you
don't know
ever
how-
win that
I
5,000?
honestly don't know how we went from the Seahawks to
So
Maxwell
poor,
House.
bro.
However, I love that you have that experience. I love that
It was
you
fun.
That is
It was fun.
that's
could
dope.
share about that. I mean, I know it was fun for me to learn about that.
Yeah.
And whether or not you went back or not, word on the street is you were an official cheerleader for the Seattle
That's the
Seahawks.
word on the street.
So that's the word on the street.
is.
That's what we're going with.
Never
Dude.
believe the streets.
Hey, that's a whole nother episode, Ronda.
whole
We'll
nother
get into that
episode.
later.
That is
Maybe
beyond
we'll get into
Sunday.
that.
That's beyond like a whole century.
Beyond Sunday.
You heard it here first. Don't believe the streets.
Well, Rhonda, tell us more about yourself. We thank you for joining us. How long have you been at Cityline, and what do you feel like you appreciate most about just being a part of what God is doing here at the church?
So far, just watching y'all is crazy. It's fun.
She said, "Just being here."
Yeah, but I've come here. I came about a year ago, a little bit more than a year. And what I love the most is that it's very, I think I shared this with Linda, but when I came, it just is simple.
Mm-hmm.
There's an anointing on it, but a simple anointing. It's very pure. The worship is what drew me as well. The word, the diversity, the generations. It just feels like home.
Yeah,
It feels like home. Feels like home. And what I love, the fact that, we're just teaching the word and we're pointing people to Jesus. And so that's simple to me.
Yeah.
That's very simple.
I love that.
Love it.
Thank you for sharing that. When you think of the last, you said a little over a year, and all that you're experiencing, what do you sense? This is always a fun question for us to ask people. What do you sense God doing in your heart, or showing you, or revealing to you as you continue to take next steps following Jesus?
That's a really good question. I didn't prepare for that one. But what he is showing me is just there is another level to go deeper and deeper, either in your prayer life, your relationship with others. What I love about Cityline also is just the community, just getting involved with community and seeing like everyone is just so connected and family. But for me, he's just like revealing the word in a deeper way. In a deeper way.
great.
It's very deep, and it's more like instead of reading, would just be reading and checking it off. Now I'm reading the word, and he's revealing his character to me more. He's revealing his heart to me, and he's also helping me examine my heart and showing me areas that I need to
love
work
that.
on. So I'm a student, man.
I'm telling you, listen, for those that are listening right now, Miss Rhonda is already dropping the truth bombs already. She's already starting to preach, and I'm already getting excited
Yeah.
about what we're going to cover today. It's good stuff. We love to have fun, and we love to have a good time, obviously. But I love that we get to talk about the deeper matters as well, as we are all being ourselves in the moment. And so that's what we want to talk about today. This last Sunday at Cityline, we started a brand new collection of talks that we're calling Everyday Dialogue, which is basically a series all about prayer. We were saying it's about the way that we learn to communicate, but also connect with Jesus. What does that look like in our lives? And so today we want to kind of go beyond Sunday and continue to have that conversation, continue to just process through. And I think what I love about what we have going on here on the couches is that we have a variety of different experiences. We have all different levels of being on the spiritual journey, right? And a wide variety of what does that look like in our life at different seasons, at different moments, and then even currently as we continue to take next steps with Jesus. And so when you think about prayer, I know that prayer is a mixed bag for people. Sometimes it's overwhelming, sometimes it's difficult, sometimes it's confusing. Sometimes people feel like, is it just wishful thinking? I feel like I'm just talking to, I don't know, I guess somebody out there, or I'm supposed to be talking to God, but is God really listening? I mean, there's so much that goes on, but I think where I want to start today is, what are your thoughts and feelings on prayer in terms of, take us back to when you were first introduced to prayer. What was that introduction like? Who kind of taught you to start that connection and dialogue with Jesus? What does that look like? Mm-hmm. Whoever wants to dive in.
Yeah. I remember I was about 5 years old. My mother was a woman of prayer. And with all of my siblings, she would dedicate time in the day. She was, hey, you guys go pray. And typically up to that point, I wouldn't really do anything because I didn't know how to pray. And so I remember one time I was just overly frustrated, and she could tell. She goes, what's the matter? I said, I don't know how to pray. I hear my brother, and it felt like he prayed with like such authority, and like he knew what he was saying, and he knew what he was talking about, And then my sister would get overly emotional, and it felt so genuine and real,
Right.
Another one of them had like just a lot of like really biblical language. We grew up on the King James Bible, so
sure.
So you hear that, and as a 5-year-old boy, and usually my older siblings, they're not much older, but I'm like, I can't do any of that. So I remember going to my mom, and she was like just go pray. I was like, I don't know how.
Right.
And she said, just talk to God like he's your friend.
Yeah.
And no matter what season of life I'm in, that statement like sticks in me. It's like, just talk to God like he's your friend. So all that insecurity and all that fear, all that anxiety that I was experiencing, like I went in my room, I sat down, took a deep breath, and I just began to talk to God about that. And I was like, what else? She goes, just talk to God about what you're mad at. Talk to God about what you're, feel sad about. Talk to God about what you're afraid of. Just talk to God about those things.
Yeah.
And so that was that's been foundational for me in prayer. And it feels like it's, there's been seasons where it's gotten more complicated than that because of my own doing, but it's never really been more complicated than that.
Right. So. That's great, man. I mean, it's a great way to lead it off. I mean, anybody else got any thoughts on that?
I remember like my first memory of prayer was before was even in church, before was ever I didn't really grow up in like a Christian household per se. Sure. I think I grew up with some sort of idea that Jesus intended to make life better, but never understood who the real Christ was. And so when I was a kid, I think I was 4 or 5 years old, I had horrible eczema as a kid, horrible eczema all over my body. Constantly at home, my parents would wrap me in wet towels. There's still pictures to this day. And doctors thought that I would live with this dermatitis for the rest of my life. It was all over my face, all over my arms, all over my legs. And I was in and out of the hospital on a regular basis. And so this is me as a kid. And my dad told me when I was 4, you just need to pray for Jesus to give you new skin. And I didn't honestly really know how to pray. It really wasn't modeled for me like that. I don't have a ton of remembrance of even going to church, but I remember I prayed, Jesus, please give me new skin. And that's all I prayed. And then the next morning, I woke up with, the way my dad tells the story is that the way I woke up next morning is I had no eczema on my body. And I was in the hospital. And I didn't, again, I'm not even,
Wow.
it's bizarre, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I wasn't even a Christ follower. Like, I didn't
Sure.
grow up. My dad, love him that I do. Like, what's up, Pops? Just wasn't really like, I don't know that we were all really following Christ. That wasn't congregating in a church community, was not really a normal part of what we did. But I don't know, somewhere within that, that's where my introduction to prayer began. And I was healed of this horrible eczema. Like, I remember it to this day. Like, I remember the feeling like wanting to crawl out of my own body just as a child. I have like very clear memory. And I remember waking up the next morning and looking at my arms and everything was gone.
Yeah.
Like, it was wild. It was wild. It was like supernatural healing before like I even knew what that meant, you know?
Yeah.
So,
No,
it
I
was
mean, I
pretty
think
cool.
that's interesting because, like, when you even think, I'm listening to you share that story, and I'm sure for those that are listening, they're like, wow, like, so prayer can be that. It can be this healing moment. But I'm reminded of even like in biblical times, like this idea of a real life skin condition known as leprosy.
Yeah.
That it existed, and people were.
Sheesh. Heard
Were
that.
shunned by that. People were thought to be unclean in some way, and then we see the way that Jesus stepped into that situation, and Jesus wasn't appalled or he didn't shy away from people in that condition. Instead, we see Jesus bringing healing
Yes.
and wholeness in that situation. So I think that's fascinating that your first experience comes before
Yeah.
ever having a relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
But yet experiencing something powerful about Jesus and who he is and his character.
It was cool because I felt like there was a moment that I had as a kid where I like at least had some level of knowledge that like Jesus loves me. Like Jesus loves me.
Yep.
And like Jesus says, also goes on throughout his ministry, tells me if you want to see the kingdom, become like a little child. And so I go back to that memory. I remember like telling people around school, like who would look at my skin and be like, did it like clockwork. And I'm like, I have eczema. It's a type of dermatitis. It's like dermatitis, you know?
Yeah. Don't look at me funny.
I would literally like when someone would ask, like that's how I would explain it. Like, so I have such clear memory of that. But then son is like, you just asked Jesus. My dad tells it to this day. He's like, son, you just asked Jesus to give you new skin. And he woke up the next day and you had new skin.
Wow.
And that's what you did.
It's pretty amazing.
So it's like, before I could ever do a thing
Yep.
for you, Jesus, you loved me.
Oh, that's
first.
incredible,
So
man.
it's
You
cool.
totally changed your story. I mean,
Yeah, it's cool, right?
Obviously, that is not my experience with prayer.
That's not my experience.
That's not been my introduction. You know, that was not. No, it was not. You
I
know,
mean, I'm
but-
sure there's things that we all got now. I'm like, hey, Jesus, could you just give me this? He's like,
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
he's like-
yeah. I still try that today. And
Wait.
Jesus is like, you don't even know what you're asking for, man.
did you heal my bank account?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Rhonda, what was your first introduction to prayer?
My first introduction to prayer was down south because I was born and raised in Mississippi
Hey.
and around a lot of older women. And no one invited me to pray. I was just there to watch.
Yeah.
I watch and I listen to them pray. And they do it all throughout the whole day. Doing laundry, hanging up the clothes outside.
Online.
Oh wow.
Online, the whole thing. They live a life of prayer. But no one ever said, here's how you pray. I learned by watching. And specifically my mom, who was the prayer warrior, but she wasn't loud.
Yeah.
So what she did, she wrote out her prayers. So I to this day still have some of her prayers that she
That's
wrote out on
great.
index cards later
That's
in
sick.
life, not when I was a kid, but as a teenager. And I still have some of her. The ink has faded, but it's the fact that I have her index cards because that's how she prayed.
That's
Write it
so
down.
cool. man.
Yeah.
I love it. I
That's
love
killer.
It. That's so great. No, I think for me, like, yeah, I'm just listening to all this, and I'm like, mine was so different. I mean, I grew up obviously in a pastor's home. I'm a pastor's kid, so church for me, there's never. As a kid, there was never not church. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, I had a different experience than Joshua had and stuff like that, where I just grew up going to church. Like, that's just what you did. You know, it's like you're tired, church is still going on, you fall asleep underneath the seats, and you know, all stuff like that.
pews.
Right? You're just always there, right? And so I think for me, I think it's probably twofold in terms of like introduction to prayer. I think it was one, my parents that would teach me. I guess a simple way to pray. Like, one was like before you go to sleep, they would teach me everybody's heard some version of "Now I lay me down to sleep."
I
You know,
pray
and
the
it
Lord
always
my soul to keep.
Yeah, I pray the Lord my soul to keep, which is always scary.
If
at
I
that
should
point.
die before I wake,
Yeah,
I pray the Lord my soul
my
to
soul to take.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's creepy.
I'm like,
You never heard that one?
I like heard it in some like hip hop song one time.
bro, I love my parents. My parents are incredible.
For a way.
But I'm like, that was one of the prayers that they taught me. And as I'm listening to it, I'm like, if I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. And I'm just like, I'd never been more afraid of the dark ever in my
so
life.
sorry, brother. I'm so sorry.
And I'm pretty sure my parents are going to hear this and they're going to start feeling bad. But I mean, my mom would walk in my room and like, no lie, I would have the covers over my head. Like I would like that. That was not like a prayer of comfort and strength for me as a young kid.
You don't say.
You know, it was like
Did wonders for me.
I did not care like if it was hot in the summer or anything like that. I had covers over my head. I was sweating it out. You know, just like I don't know. I guess hoping I make it to the morning. You know what I mean? Like it was one of those things. You know, but that was like one of my first introductions. And then I would say also. We were very common in praying over our food. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So there's kind of like, I think for a lot of young kids, that's like an entry point to a prayer is like, hey, we thank God for our food and we ask him to bless it and stuff. But then I would say I grew up, as most people know, in a style of church or a kind of church that is would be, I guess, called Pentecostal or a bit more charismatic. Mm-hmm. And so I observed a lot of different kinds of praying going on. And to your point of like, I guess more is caught than taught sometimes. You just kind of observe things and you just naturally begin to think, I guess that's how we roll. You know what I mean? I guess that when it comes to prayer, I guess like that's just the way you do it. And if you're not doing it that way, then you're doing it wrong. And if you are doing it wrong, then you're really not praying. And so it was kind of one of those interesting, kind of experiences for me, and has sent me on a learning journey though of what really is prayer. How do I connect with God? How do I commune with him? And what is that like? Which is why it's interesting that we talk about the title of this series being this everyday dialogue. Let's talk about that for a little bit. Has prayer felt more like a monologue to you, or the majority of the time, or has it felt like you've experienced more of a dialogue collectively as you are doing your best to communicate with God? What does that look like in your life? Because I feel like a lot of people, right, we're used to bringing God all of our requests, and he invites us to. He says, cast all of our cares upon him. You have not because you ask not. Mm-hmm. There's all these encouragements in Scripture that God absolutely wants to hear from us. But this idea that I'm gonna bring all these things to God, but I'm not just gonna dump them there. I'm also gonna sit and I'm gonna listen for God to speak to me. Has prayer had that experience for you? Why or why not?
Yeah, I think for the majority of my life, growing up in a Pentecostal context, and hearing, and it's not a knock on this phrase. Actually, I have a profound appreciation for people who carry that mantle. Mm-hmm. But hearing the term prayer warrior as a child growing up, hearing that, it started to frame in my mind that prayer was a set of skills to master. So it wasn't ever necessarily a dialogue or a monologue. It was like, it's a muscle that I gotta work. I gotta master this skill so that I could one day arrive at this level of
like you got your prayer black belt.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? It's like, okay, and then you go through these tests. It's like, how good of a prayer are you? Can you endure? Can you pray for an hour? Can you speak in tongues for an hour? Can you when you're praying, are you weeping? What's the authority behind your words? Are people being healed when you pray for them?
Right.
Oh, notching your belt.
Triggering.
Right. And so that was always like for the majority of my life, that was the way I approached it. Yeah. It was an hour of power. That was the way that you get down early in the morning before. And
it was always early. I'm like, why is it always got to be early? I feel like that would knock me out of contention right away. As soon as I heard prayer be talking about it's always early in the morning.
Especially if you're not
you get
a
up.
morning person.
I'm like, look, Jesus doesn't want to hear anything I have to say that early, because I don't even know what I'm saying that early. You know what I mean? Anyway, sorry.
So that was kind of the approach for a long time. And I know in recent years, I've begun to learn different avenues and different aspects of prayer that have allowed me to reframe that, and to kind of maybe have a healthier relationship with this like what does it mean to be mature in prayer?
It's great.
So learning doesn't have to always be so wordy. Doesn't necessarily have to be an hour. There are some things that I'm gonna spend some time contending.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't have to be shouting. It doesn't always have to have snot bubbles. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
It doesn't
right.
all those things, again, they can happen in prayer.
Yes.
But if they don't happen, it doesn't mean you didn't pray effectively.
That's great.
So that's where I am now. Now it feels more like dialogue, where I engage in conversation. And again, it goes back to me as a child. Just talk to God like he's your friend.
Yeah, no, it's great.
You know, it became something else for a long time, and it's becoming again what it was.
Love that. It's great. Any other thoughts on that?
I mean, very similar to what Troy was saying, like especially in my teenage years and young adult years, it was the Pentecostal, and there was a huge movement.
Right.
And you would just, and again, I was just watching people, so I thought, well, this is where I need to pray. And then I felt like I could never pray good enough. So when I was asked to pray in corporate prayer, I shied away because it was like, I can't pray like Sister So-and-so. She's praying the word of God, and I don't even, I just barely know Psalms 23.
Yeah, I know John 3:16.
Right, and that's all I know. Yeah, John, yeah. And so I used to compare my prayer to others, and I think that was horrible way to do it. But it's been a process. It's been a learning curve. It's been using other tools and being around people and just being silent.
Yeah.
And this is, as a plug, this is what I love about Cityline. When I first came, I think you were preaching on prayer or the spiritual transformation, and one of them is prayer and how we do the guided prayer. And I mean, that has been an eye-opener for me. And I've been walking with the Lord for over 25 years. But this segment of meeting together on Tuesday morning, going through guided prayer, which you may talk about later, that has been a game changer.
Oh, that's excellent.
That has been a game changer.
I'm encouraged to hear that. I love that.
I think, I mean, in more recent years, it's definitely looked a lot like dialogue, but realizing that I talk a lot less now, and I think I allow the Lord to speak over me. Like David says, he who redeems your life from the pit, but he crowns you with love and kindness and love and compassion. So a lot of the time, my dialogue with God looks a lot like me just, like, as of late, it's just been a posture of, like, God, I am just here for whatever you want. Like, and so just speak to me. Like, be it a word, be it a phrase, be it something I need to journal out of the overflow, like something he's depositing into my heart, and then I'm writing that on you know, the pages that are before me. Like, that's a lot of what it's looked like recently. So dialogue, but I definitely speak a lot less now.
Sure.
I think I speak more when on behalf of other people, like for the purpose of intercession or anything like that. But like, at least from my personal prayer time, it's looked a lot more like just a posture and allowing the Lord for his dialogue and the narrative of heaven to just wash over my mind and cleanse me.
Yeah.
And so,
That's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, man. I think when we talk about prayer, I think there's probably a lot of our listeners that are tuning in today that have lots of, I guess maybe we can call them concerns or frustrations, or, you know, things are confusing sometimes about prayer. We hear this idea of, okay, dialogue, and Troy's over here talking about, like, yeah, just talk to God as a friend, you know? But sometimes, like, you know, we get very real with our friends, you know what I mean? We say things to our friends that we're not sure that we would ever say to God. But yet at the same time, this idea of being mad or frustrated or overwhelmed or even sad, the idea that God invites us to share those things with him as well, not just our requests or not just telling him how good he is, but this idea of a whole variety of emotion that we carry with us as humans, that God invites us to that. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what becomes frustrating, confusing, what becomes like, I think this kind of leads into what we were talking about last Sunday about, you know, sometimes we have some fears as well that come along with, like, I want to engage in prayer, but I got these real fears, I guess. And maybe that's a better word than concerns, as it relates, like, can I say this? Can I not say that?
Yeah.
What can't I say? And if I said this, but what happens if I bring this and then God does this? You know what I mean? Like, what does that look like in our life today?
Right.
Yeah, I think back in my life, and I think back on 3 distinct times when I've had probably the most gut-wrenching, heartbreaking, or angry words in prayer, resulted in some of the most impactful times. Now, here's the caveat. In the response from God was different each time.
Sure.
In that, I remember being 14, praying for my mom to be healed. That didn't happen in the way that we envisioned it happening. She ended up going on to be with the Lord.
Sure.
And I remember going to see her that day, the day that they told us that they would pull the plug. And I remember from Sunday to Wednesday, every day, praying.
Yeah.
Go there Wednesday, and the first thing I hear from the doctor is that tomorrow we're pulling the plug, right? And so you imagine a 14-year-old kid in the elevator shaft of a hospital just doubled on the floor, right?
Yeah.
Got up from that after I don't know how long, walked into that room, and I'm like, I can't explain this other than to say Jesus was there.
Yeah.
Like the peace that I felt and the embrace that I felt in a room where peace and embrace was not the reality.
Right. Right.
Like nobody can tell me otherwise.
Right.
You know, and I remember that comforting presence of God. There was no word spoken.
Yeah.
It was just an experience. I remember, about a decade ago being very angry at God with the way I felt life had gone when I chose to be obedient. I'm like,
right.
God, I'm doing what you asked me to do, and this is going the wrong way.
Right.
And I remember
God's not keeping up on his end of the contract.
You know what I'm saying? I'm like, yo, bro, like I'm blessed in the city, blessed in the field.
Yeah.
And this feels nothing like that.
Yeah.
So in a lot of angry words, some words that I would not repeat in church, just towards God, just had it out. I wasn't disrespectful or dishonoring, but I was honest and I didn't hold back.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear anything for months from that.
Right.
And then I remember being out in the middle of the night, looking at the stars in a different state with a group of friends and kind of sharing where I was. And then one of them just said, well, God was right there with you, and his heart was broken too with the way that went.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God, it took you that long to respond to me on this. And then it wasn't a voice, an audible. It was through the voice of a friend who had cultivated a life of prayer as well.
Right.
Then they came and shared. And then I remember a few months ago, 9 months ago, having a situation that was, devastating. And I go into my office, I close the door, and I just committed to just being real with God. Mm-hmm. God, I'm devastated. I'm sorrowful. Like it was just a deep sorrow, and I let it out. Like previous in my life, I learned to stuff that stuff and hide that stuff and not let anybody in on any of it. And I just kind of let it out with the caveat that I still know who you are. Mm-hmm. And I remember I turned on a worship song, and that song was just singing about the goodness of God. And it was a reminder in that time of brokenness and grief that God is still good.
Yeah.
And so one through a worship song, another through a friend, another through just a moment, and then often, through scriptures that come to mind as I sit and reflect. Yeah. And so that is, kind of with prayer, it's like, man, when I am the most real, I experience God in the most real way.
No, I love that, man. Like, I think
so good, Troy.
Yeah, it's. There's so much to unpack, like what you just said, But I feel like one of the things that you mentioned was this idea of we said that's one of the ways we pray is that we're invited to keep it real before God, and so the idea of keeping it real is being able to share all those things that you just mentioned. You said that there was a time where you went through a difficult situation where there are words that you wouldn't repeat in church. But yet you felt comfortable saying those things to Jesus. And I love the distinction that you made is that when we talk about Jesus inviting us to come to him as a friend or to share what's on our mind, he's not inviting us to a place of disrespect and dishonor.
No.
But I love that you said he's inviting me to a place of honesty. Mm-hmm. Honesty. What has that experience been like for you, Rhonda, in being honest with God?
A lot of weeping.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's it's so real even now, just listening to Troy and just think about there was so many because of just my background and the abuse and all of the things.
Yeah.
But to see that God met me right in the pit where I was. But it was a lot of weeping. And so when I started to pray with others and for others, I used to weep. And I was ashamed of that at first, but I thought, no, because when I would cry out to God, I was crying a lot because I was in pain. Like, have you ever prayed so hard and cried so hard that your body aches? I have.
Yes.
And so, but I think for me, it's like in the stillness where I'm broken, he meets me. He meets me in such a way that I come undone.
Yeah.
Where I'm prostrate on the floor. And sometimes, y'all, it has been in the car. It has been in the shower.
Yeah.
It has just been, he just shows up when I least expect him. But I'm usually crying.
Yeah.
I can't say that I've ever been mad at God,
Sure.
but I've been somewhat disappointed. But I think the thing that's got me the most recently is people in my life that have passed away that were my spiritual moms, and all they did, their life was full of prayer.
Yeah.
But then they died with dementia. And I'm talking to God. It's like, how can you take these women out and you watching them? But he told me, he said, their mind is going, but their spirit is still alive. So to be able to pray with these women with dementia, they were praying, but it was their spirit man that was praying. But I didn't understand that.
Right.
But I just know that my prayer just changed, just being broken.
Yeah.
Just being so broken and just crying and not knowing what to say. Not knowing what to say.
I love that. I mean, and so I think sometimes prayer is, we don't know what to say.
No.
So sometimes prayer is, and we need to acknowledge this, prayer is without words.
Yep.
So without, or I would even say not even really without words, I would say prayer is beyond words.
Yes.
So when you
Beyond
talk about the
words.
idea of beyond words, and you talk about connecting with God from the very soul of your being, in terms of whatever that emotion is for you, you're saying it was tears, it was crying out, laying just flat before the Lord. I know I've had situations in my life where I think the question that I ask God is like, where are you? Like, where are you? Like,
Where are you?
I'm doing everything I think I can or what you want me to do, but like, how are you going to figure this out? Like, God, like, where are you? Like, and I remember being just like so frustrated, right? And so that frustration with God, it was, I wanted to be, I guess, more mad at God, and I was giving my frustrations to God. But what I feel like I've always experienced when I'm being frustrated towards God is that my frustration turns from being frustrated at God to being frustrated how much he comforts and loves me.
Come on. Come on.
Have you ever had that?
Yes,
I'm
dude.
just like, for real? Like,
Yeah.
I'm calling out to you. I'm like, God, where are you? And how could you? And what are you up to right now? And God, I don't think like I don't feel you like I used to. And then as I sit there and I'm just waiting for him to respond, I'm just like, man,
Yep.
because there's just a comfort and there's
Just
a
the
peace and there's like a
comfort,
love and there's almost like you feel like a warmth of
He's
an
there.
embrace. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like I don't know if that's been your experience, Josh, as you've kind of, like continued to follow Jesus with different things going on in life. I mean, I guess, what's going on, man?
Yeah.
Like, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think for me, through prayer, have experienced the closeness of his presence, like the manifested presence of God, which I think, like, the more that I'm just hearing everybody, I even think about Troy's experience on an elevator shaft and feeling this supernatural comfort
Right.
that just happened, in which I think that in a way is, for me, it's become normative. But I've cultivated an intimacy with God where to be honest, a lot of the time I do expect him to meet me in that way,
sure.
just not because of anything that I could do, but because of who he is. But that's like a difficult concept to get your head around because there's this mysticism and there's this mystery. It's almost this ethereal experience that happens. And I think if your mind cannot conjure the fullness and the weightiness of that creates this fear and trepidation that makes you feel intimidated, like I cannot fully approach a life of prayer with reverence and sincerity because I don't actually believe for myself that these things are genuinely possible.
Right.
Now, perhaps the flip side of that is if I do experience this supernatural encounter and there is this mysterious heavenly transaction between earth colliding with heaven, like what does that experience in form of my present reality right now? So if I experience God's presence in such a manifested, powerful way, that will change me for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Like that is this road to Damascus type of experience. That is this Paul going going on a mountain and being with God and Moses seeing God and having this encounter and having this experience that from moment that it happens, like it's like I have an unveiled face and I contemplate and I can see the Lord's glory for what it truly is.
Yeah.
Now that means that suddenly everything that I thought of before now actually has to be left to the wayside.
Right.
And I've decided from this moment forward that I must pursue the real Jesus. And that's a hard thing to come to terms with. And I won't say, I'm not at the place where I'm say that the mysterious, like heavenly, ethereal aspect of the experience of God's presence is far from people. I think it's like when it happens, you recognize that the weightiness of what that implies, the implications of we make decisions in life and it does something to us, right?
Yeah.
And it's no different in a scenario like this. And so for me, I've had to swallow the pill that if I want this type of intimacy with God, where if I want to hear from him every day, and I want to experience the closeness and the friendship of knowing Holy Spirit like he is a person and he's residing, and I feel that comfort and I feel that embrace that you guys are talking about, I have to equally accept what that informs of my life from this moment forward, that I will not only will I not turn back, but I just don't know that I can anymore. I literally can't decide and settle for a lesser than. And to be honest, it kind of wrecks your whole approach, like the ways that you approach Jesus before. It informs relationships.
Right.
It's informed like these encounters that I've had with God. It's changed everything about my theology. It's changed everything about my worship philosophy and the way that I carry myself and what I believe is genuinely possible for all people. And so,
that's great.
you know, but I will also say, the last thing I'll say, the flip side to that though, is a lot of that was rooted firstly in formation and formative practices that I think, you know, there is that experience between us and heaven. We experience that comfort, that supernatural presence. But I will say a lot of the beginnings of the foundation of a Christian life is also rooted in practice and rooted in lives that are full of formative things that help bring a sincere devotion to God. And as a result of it, our eyes become more aware of his presence too.
No, I love that. I think that's, there's several things I want to call out there because I think we can kind of process a little bit more. Because I do think that there's people within Cityline, beyond Cityline, that might be listening to the podcast, that they want a deeper experience with Jesus. They want to feel a closeness with him. They want this idea of connection and communion with Jesus, but for whatever reason, there's some real stumbling blocks, some real roadblocks, maybe some things that need to go beneath the surface to really address. You mentioned this idea of like some real fears, you know, that exist sometimes that could hinder us. And then also you talk about this idea of practice, whereas we know that prayer is not just theory, right? It's way more practice than it is any kind of theory. So we have to find ways to engage, but there are those times where we want to engage, but fear hinders us. And so I know we talked about fear last Sunday, some things that we might not always be aware of, like the fear of like, I'm going to bring all my requests to God. And it didn't work out the way I wanted it to when I got the news from the doctor in regards to your mom, right? Or that's that idea of submitting those things to him and having to trust God's end result over my own it's frightening sometimes because we know what we want so bad. Other times it's the fear of we talked about this, the idea of silence, where God, you're not saying anything, and what's going on, or sometimes it's exposure, or sometimes, I'm getting this all wrong, and so I can't. So is there anything that you guys think is a real fear when you still come before God, no matter what stage of the journey you are in following Jesus, that you just think, man, I may not have recognized that exists in me, and it could be holding me back from deeper communion with Jesus?
For me, like I'm working to a place where I think accepting the scriptural truth of that perfect love would cast out all fear. So like I'm trying to do that, but I also recognize the anxiety and the inconsistencies of my life often inform my approach to God. So maybe I'm not fearing the Lord in a way that's like, oh, I'm fearful of what he's going to do to me necessarily, but like anxiety and the weightiness of my life and every inconsistency seems to inform what my level of faith is to believe God for whatever it is that I could be asking for, or that I'm praying about, or that I'm seeking him about.
Yeah.
That's really, to me, that's what it is. I think my own natural day to day, the stuff that I don't think God is necessarily causing, but is just a natural part of the brokenness of humanity.
Sure.
That human experience is, for me, that's what makes prayer difficult sometimes. Is like, it's kind of not viewing prayer like this is a first resort, like this is the first thing that I go to, but instead huddling into this state of timidity and fear and anxiety, and it takes me away from the comfort of my Father. And so my like remedy for that has been like, I recognize that Jesus has not asked me to check anything at the door. Sure. And instead I get to bring the fullness and the entirety of my body and my like, talking about our true and proper worship is offering up our bodies as living sacrifices. The wholeness of who I am, the entirety of my life gets to be brought to the feet of Jesus. And but fear is present, especially just because life sucks. Life sucks sometimes, dude. And stuff sucks, and people die, and people turn your back on you, and relationships fail, and you know, sometimes marriages don't work. And and in the weightiness of all of that, honestly, that sometimes has informed my prayer life.
Yeah, so, that's good, man. Thank you for sharing that. Rhonda, what does that look like for you?
So much there. I'm thinking in terms of just as we participate here at church as being part of the prayer team, right? And the people that come out for prayer. And so setting myself to the side, I just praying for others. And sometimes that can get really weighty because people are going through so much. So God is showing me that I'm just a vessel to pray for people, but to cast all of those burdens on him and to believe and trust in him. But when you pray for things and it doesn't come out the way you prayed, you know, and then you have people will say, well, I thought this was going to happen. I thought that was going to happen. You said something last Sunday about, you know, God is not really, and I'm not, if I misquote you, please correct me, but God is not obligated, right, to answer a prayer the way we want it to be prayed. And if I misspoken, please. But that is so true. But I think the intimacy with the Lord, the deeper we go with him, when the prayers that we pray don't come out the way we want them,
right?
It's so good now. He's just a good God.
Yeah.
And even if it doesn't come out the way we want it, it's still okay because he's good. And I remember following a pastor, his wife died. The kids didn't understand, and people around the world was praying, but yet her healing was on the other side. It was in heaven. Mm-hmm. And we always say, well, what happened? You know, but we can't, I just got to that point, I can't ask those questions. I can't ask him, but I just have to believe in my Savior, and I know that he comforts me even when I do lose people to death.
Sure.
Mm-hmm. He just comforts me. And I don't know if I answered the question, but there's something about humanity that sometimes get upset with the Lord because he didn't answer the prayer the way we wanted it to be answered. But he is so good.
Yeah.
And that intimacy that we have with him as individuals, first here, before it could go out, is just like, I can't explain it. So I tell people all the time, I can't explain it.
Wow.
It's not meant for me to explain. I didn't write this love story. I just know that Jesus loves you.
That's so good.
And he loves he loves the one that left, or the one that, whatever may happen. I just know he's so good. And the only way I got to know that is because I spent time with him. The only way I got to know that is because I know his voice.
Right.
The only way I got to know that because I learned to surrender my life to him. I get so kind of wound up, as you can hear my voice, because I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know that he loves me.
Yeah.
And I know that he loves you. And I think about when Troy was in the elevator, you know, he came through.
Yeah.
He comes through.
Yeah. Yeah, he always does. And I think I love what you're describing is that, like, it sounds like in your journey of following Jesus, you've come to know more about his character and who he is and what he can do, and that you're willing to trust in that character. So that idea of trust coming before faith, you know, to build trust in who we know God to be. I think so much of our prayer life hinges on our view of God. Not just our understanding, but the way that we see God.
Yeah.
Is God the mean father in the sky that you know is not going to give us all that we want just because, you know, he likes playing mean tricks on us? Or is he, like we said, is he the divine vending machine where we go to him and, like, I'm just going to give him my laundry list of stuff and I expect for him to do it exactly like I want it to. And I'm just like, man, if God, if that's who God is, like, that's not the God you need to be praying to. Because I've learned that prayers of high school Jack, had God answered some of those prayers in the way high school Jack,
Where would you be?
wanted that, you see what I'm saying? Like, my life would be totally flipped upside down, totally different. And I'm grateful in hindsight and looking back that, God, you know better than me. You saw beyond me, and that you chose to lead me in a different direction, or told me, hey, I appreciate you bringing that to me, but not now.
That's so
and
good,
not yet. And yes, maybe, but not for a while. And there's all those things, like those are ways that God answers. It's not always like, no problem.
Correct.
You got it. Here you go. And I think sometimes we just assume that that's what God is, especially when we say, cast all your cares upon me. But yet he's the same God that says, I want you to talk to me about what you need and what you are feeling. But I also want you to know that I know what you need before you ever ask. I'm that intimately acquainted with you. The question is, are you that intimately acquainted with me? To where you can trust me. You know what I mean? To know that we can, again, it's this dialogue. We can dialogue about this. We can talk about this. But even, you know, I look at, 20-something Jack, you know what I mean? And some of the prayers that by that time, you know, Linda and I are married, we've got a family, and 20-something Jack wanted, you know what I mean? And it's like, I'm glad that God, in hindsight now, having continued to stay on the journey with him, didn't answer some of those prayers, right? And even the prayers that I brought to him that I thought were like more of a contract basis of like, you know, there was a time that Linda and I were praying like, okay, God, here's what we're willing to do. We're willing to do this, this, and this, as long as, you know what I mean? It's like, here's the caveat. Here's the back end of that. As long as you see to it that we get this, this, and this, then my answer is yes. I'm all in. And God's like, do you know how crazy that sounds? Like that. You're not, if you've got all kinds of conditions on your prayer life, then you're not all in. And if you've got all kinds of conditions on your prayer life, then you're really not trusting me. And so God had to break me of my conditionary responses to him, to actually, to experience what I'm experiencing life right now, to live in the calling that God's placed on my life, to really experience the fullness of his love that I experienced today. He had to break me of all those conditions and get me to that place where I was like, okay, God, like I do surrender. I do submit these things to you. God, and not my will, but your will be done. God, I want your best for my life. I don't want, you know, because I think I know what I need. I know myself well, God, and God's always reminded me, like, but I know you better than you know you. And the more you actually get to know me, the more what I'm trying to do in your life will begin to make sense. And so I think that's been my biggest disconnect throughout my life in prayer is like, if I'm not actively getting to know God more through connection and communion and communication and listening for God and stuff like that, then I truly don't, what he's doing in me sometimes just doesn't make sense There's a huge disconnect. But when I'm connected with God, I see what he's doing I see the fingerprints of his hand upon my life. And then I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so
You know what I
good.
mean? Like the fear, the anxiety, all that stuff that I deal with as a human, regularly.
Yeah,
If I'm bringing that before God, then God, he's releasing those fears. He's relinquishing that. He's giving me a comfort. I truly feel like he does give a peace
He does.
that surpasses all of our understanding.
Yeah.
Because I don't. One, we're never going to master prayer.
Nope.
Right? We're going
No gurus, man.
It's on a
No
continuous
gurus.
learning, right? And that's the good news, right? It's continuous learning. I think that can be frustrating for people to say we'll never master it, but I think it's good news that we have this ongoing, continuous, ongoing, like the hope and like say, for me and Linda, I know for our relationship to thrive and us to have intimacy with each other as a husband and wife, it requires being better at communicating with one another.
Yeah.
Being better at not just hearing one another and understanding one another, but being able to verbalize things effectively to one another. And I think the same is true with us and Jesus, right? That we're getting better continuously at communicating with God, at listening for him, understanding this idea of dialogue, and then trusting in him as we willingly allow him to lead.
Yeah,
right? To
yeah,
lead.
I echo a lot of that, and just
so good.
like kind of the birth of some of my fears and prayers, and it goes back to what we said when we did People of Prayer. Like prayer is not a skill to master; it's a master to meet.
Yeah.
But it's a master that already knows me.
Yeah.
And that part, like he knows me better than I know me, and as I engage in relationship with him, I get to know him, but then I get to know me.
Yeah.
The me that's been concealed because of life experience, because of trauma, intentionally and unintentionally, the me that I don't fully understand.
Yeah.
Like meeting that person, man, like that right there is sometimes what causes me to have a little trepidation in prayer. Like we have this song where, we sing and say, it's getting harder to recognize the person I was before I encountered Christ.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember one Sunday we introduced
that
that song
song.
and I'm singing it. I'm like, man, it's so good. And I'm thinking back in my life. And I'm like, Troy, you've done so well. You made a lot of progress. And then the next day,
Yep. Old Troy showed up.
man, my boy, he said, you missed me?
I know that song.
How you been?
Where you been?
How you doing?
I'm hard to recognize. Why don't you get a good look at me, boy? And I was
Ain't
like,
go nowhere.
and I had this moment where I'm dealing, I'm dealing with my son, and he's having his emotions are in disarray. And then in my frustration of trying to help him order his emotions, mine are all out of whack. And, and I'm blowing up at him, just get it together, and I'm losing it.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's almost like I see it happening, and I'm like, what are you doing?
Right.
But I can't, the door's open, bro, and I can't stop it.
That's
Yeah.
real,
And then I
though.
remember I drop him off at school, and I'm beating myself up about it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God, what is that? And all I hear back from God, I still love you, son.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, can you chastise me?
Well,
You know what I'm saying? Like, can
that's
you just
so
come
good.
down
How about
on
put
me?
me on restriction?
Like, I just
Yeah.
came down on him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Can you do that? Because,
so
and it's
good,
like, man,
Troy.
like,
And he doesn't.
He
That's so
doesn't.
good.
And I'm like, that's how much he knows me, is the thing I needed most.
Yeah.
To help me move in a direction of love and restoration
Yeah.
was a reminder that my father loves me.
This is so good.
And that I can reflect that now back to my son.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
man.
You know, and I'm like,
And then
God-
you're learning something about prayer in that moment too, because here's like we said, like the most basic form of prayer is asking God for help.
Yep.
Right? Like, God, I need your help.
Yep.
When this old me comes up, I need your help when
Yep.
I'm lashing out, and then you show me a different way, and so I need your help to be more like you.
Yep.
So that the most basic form is help. But I've learned also the most basic form in my life is I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I did have to
So,
when I
so I'm always like that. I'm like, God, like I'll do something like you said,
Yeah.
like the old me will come back out, and then God, I'm sorry that I didn't even consider praying before I made any of those choices or decisions or did that
Yep.
thing, and then I feel bad and I say I'm sorry. But even in I'm sorry, I love what you said. It's like it's okay.
Yep.
It's okay.
Yeah, I picked Deacon up from school that day and I said, hey, man, I'm sorry that I was telling you to have your emotions in check and I did not have mine in check. And he goes,
Wow.
I know.
I'm weak.
He saw it.
Yeah,
can
but
hear it
like I
right
remember
now.
I was processing some of that with you and Linda, and he was like, "Hey, here's a prayer," because dealing with a lot of anxiety,
Yeah.
about some transitions in life and things, and I'm like, I don't know where this is coming from,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm like, it's things that I felt like I had a handle on. You know how you get there? It's like, oh, I got that. I'm solid.
Right.
Move on to the next thing. And then it's like, start dealing with this, and then more is revealed in you. And I'm like, I don't have that handled. And I remember you just invited me. He's like, hey, it's a simple prayer that I've learned over the years. And it said, God, help me to get to know me as I get to know you.
Yeah.
Which is one of the most comforting and terrifying prayers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, help me to get to know me. I'm like, I want to know you.
I know enough about me.
You know, knowing me is sometimes hard, but it goes all the way back to, you know, to the garden. It's like we want to cover ourselves in fig leaves and we want to hide, you know, as God is walking in the cool of the day. Like, and because we start to see things about ourselves, we feel like we need to hide, but God reminds us of who he is.
Yeah.
And in knowing who he is, right, it allows it provides the framework and the invitation for us to accept his embrace. And then it wasn't like he justified my behavior.
Right.
He goes, I still love you, son. And I want you to respond like I responded.
Right.
You know? And so I'm like, that for me is like, okay, how can I be better at that? And it isn't a do better.
Yeah.
It's a be better.
And it's not in your own strength.
No, it's like I need to spend more time with my father.
Yeah.
So I can become more like my father.
Yeah. I wanna
So I
help
can
you be
respond more like my father.
Yeah.
You know, because my son responds like me. That's the hard part. I'm like, he responds to things the way I respond to things.
Yep.
Less mature, yes, but it's the same. I'm like, we're doing the same thing right now.
Exactly.
You know, so I'm like, oh, if I want to be more like my father, I need to spend more time with him.
Yeah.
The reason Deacon is the way he is because he spends an awful lot of time with his father.
sure.
For better or for worse.
Correct. That's so good, man.
Yeah.
I love that. I love this conversation. I love what's happening here. And I love that if our listeners don't know that this series is a total of 6 weeks where we're talking about everyday dialogue. So there's lots we can say about prayer. There's tons of things that we can cover. We cannot and we will not do it all in one podcast. But
I got 12 hours.
Yeah, but we've talked about a lot today. And so as we kind of think about maybe landing the plane for today, for those that are tuning in, how would you, and I think it's a good question for all of us, based on what you're learning about prayer or some tools that maybe you utilize as it comes to prayer, how would you encourage people that are listening today that find themselves struggling with prayer? Whether prayer has become dry or prayer has become monotonous, or whether prayer has just been like that feeling of like, yeah, I don't know where to start and I do want to talk to him like a friend, but fill in the blank, right? So how would you encourage people who are struggling with prayer today? So the lightning round question, you know what I'm saying, that we go to.
If it's a struggle and if you don't know where to go, start with telling God that it's a struggle and you don't know where to go.
It's good.
You know, take a breath. God, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I don't know where to go from here. And God's like, all right, take my hand and we'll go from here. I think that's the best, you know, like, you know, that's a good way to just begin the conversation exactly where you are. Confused and desiring it, but not knowing how to get there. I think,
Pray as you can, not as you can.
Acknowledge that, like verbalize it or mentally, you know, ruminate on it, but like make that, like, you know, confession, so to speak, make that to God. And you'll hear his invitation to come and follow.
I love that.
Yeah, that's, you know, Pastor Jack, you closed on Sunday. I have my notes.
Yeah.
I take notes.
All right.
I'm not
Shout
going
out-
to recreate it.
shout
but
out to note
What
takers.
did Pastor say? He said, pray as you can, not as you can't. He just said that. And those nuggets was keep it simple. And keep it real.
Yeah.
And keep a regular rhythm. Keep it ongoing, even if it's 5 minutes a day.
Yeah.
If it's in your car, if it's waiting in line at Starbucks for a coffee,
Yeah.
just keep it simple and just ask him.
I love that reminder that you just said too about just pray as you go. So it could be in line at Starbucks. It
Yeah,
could
it
be
can.
while you're sitting in your car in traffic.
Yes, sir.
It could be, you mentioned earlier, the women that you learned from, they're outside hanging the clothes on the clothing line and they're just having
They just
interaction
talking.
and talking with God. You know, I love that. Yeah.
I think, you know, Paul says, "Pray with. I will pray with understanding," and I think the level of what I understand is sometimes the fact that I don't understand, and just knowing more about me and knowing more about what I feel and the heaviness that's inside of me. And so I think it's just everyone knows how to take inventory of what they feel.
Right.
Everyone can do it, because most of the time we're keeping a mental checklist of all of the things we're experiencing in our life, not just the circumstances itself, but the circumstances and how they affect us and what we feel. And so I think even just journaling and creating a little bit of a list of what are some things that I'm processing and thinking through, like this is a super practical step. Like, hey, I write these things down so that way when I approach God, like I actually have things to be able to pray for, versus mindlessly approaching God. I love in the mundanity we can learn to practice the presence of God, but I also think it's important to have a little bit of a formative practice and integrated within that. And so coming before God with a journal and looking at that and just trusting that in your dialogue with you and him, God, these are the things that I understand about my life. And somewhere within this, there's joy.
Yeah.
There's also anger.
Yeah.
There's celebration. And there's also lament. And so is there a way all of those things can be integrated into our dialogue with God? Maybe it's just as simple as telling God about your day. Like, God, these are the things that I experienced. I'm struggling with my coworkers. I don't understand what you're doing in my life and my vocation. God, I lost my job today.
Yeah.
Like, my marriage is in disarray. I feel lonely. I don't have friends. You know, just
Yeah.
things like that. God, I'm struggling opening my business. Like, God, I don't know how to navigate who to vote for. Like,
Sure.
you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, even
Yeah.
stuff is, we got the primaries around the corner. Like,
Yeah.
hey, God, like, these are the things that I'm bringing to you, because these have everything to do with how I'm feeling and what's going on inside my body. And I know you care about that deeply. And so maybe just writing that stuff down and then in an honest way, just presenting that to God.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that. I think for me too, it's like, yeah, I think prayer is kinesthetic. You know, I know sometimes we think, oh, it's just verbal interaction with God, but I'm really trying to get a better understanding of this idea of how do we, when we talk about living or learning and living the ways of Jesus, the idea of living it is like we need to embody this. And so regularly Jesus in the scriptures would get up and he would go find a solitary place, is what
Did he
it was
get
called.
up early in the morning?
He did it early, but it doesn't mean that I got to do it early. So at some point in my day, I find a place. I think that's the point of finding a place to be alone with God. But what I've learned lately is that, like, my place that I find to be alone with God, I do that the same thing over and over again. And so sometimes prayer becomes like, oh, it gets a little bit boring. It gets a little bit mundane, you know. And I know God still meets me there, but I'm like, I feel like I'm not maximizing prayer. So what I've learned is I just have to switch it up. So sometimes instead of being inside, I go outside and I find that place. Or other times it's like, I get up and I just walk, so I pray while I walk. And if I can't take a walk, I just kind of pace in a certain room of the house, and just kind of that rhythm of walking gives me kind of like a cadence with God, and I feel kind of like that opens me up to Him more. And then here lately, what's been really helpful for me is I like to incorporate music with praying, some sort of worship music, or maybe kind of like just kind of ambient, like instrumental type things. I often think of David as he was ministering before the Lord. Talks about, like, you know, his style of music and the way that music was such an impactful way of worshiping God, that I just kind of turn that on and I allow my thoughts and my thinking be directed towards God. And then that kind of leads me into a place of praying. And somehow that music accompanying me it just, I don't know, I sense a deeper presence of God for whatever reason. And it's like I said, that's not always the case, but it's what I'm learning right now. And so
I agree. That's
so it's good stuff.
good. We underestimate like sometimes we got to we contextualize anything else. Why would we not contextualize our prayer life?
Right,
Like, we
exactly.
should be mindful of the fact that, like, hey, maybe I shouldn't do this and try this when I'm in a state of just like chaos is ensued all around me. Not saying that there isn't power sometimes in something like that as well, but as far as the formative, like you're developing a practice of prayer in your life. Like homie, you should probably do this in a time that it makes sense.
It's good.
Maybe before anybody's actually awake. There's nothing spiritual about getting up early.
Sure.
But there's everything spiritual about creating time
That
with
part.
God. But
That
that's what, and you said this, 99% of prayer, you said this past week, 99% of prayer is just showing up.
Yep.
And so
Yep.
be present. And also just the last thing I'll say, just because I've been feeling in my spirit, like, don't make covenants with God. God's established his covenant with you. So don't feel like you've got to come to God with all of this stuff of like, God, if I do this and this and this for you, and I keep these commands, and if I give enough to my church and I live generously enough with my money and my resources, then will you bless me with these things and meet me in the middle of my circumstance?
No.
I'm like, no, don't. Like, God's already tore down this dividing wall.
Yeah.
There's no reason to build something back up again between you and him. And so, just to piggyback off of that.
That's good,
So,
man.
just
I
feeling
appreciate
in me.
that. No, it's
So,
good. So I know that some of our regular listeners, because we already got seven podcasts in, 7 episodes in, we got regular listeners.
Yeah, we
now.
do. We have regular
So
listeners.
we got some regular listeners that were like, you know what they didn't do? They didn't do the highs and lows. They always start with the highs and lows of like, how's your week? How's it going? And we know. We did that.
Got to switch things up.
But here's the thing. We all are dealing with highs and lows. And the idea of today jumping into the prayer discussion, talking about what the significance of prayer is to take our highs and lows, how your week has been, and your week, and our weeks collectively, and to submit those things before the Lord. To not just talk about and verbalize what the highs and the lows are, but to come before God in prayer with both the real needs and the real feelings, but also with the sense of gratitude and thanks. I think that's where a lot of my prayers end up. I feel like David's model sometimes is like David starts out with thanks and praise, and then he ends up with like this, crazy ways he's feeling. It's all out of control all throughout the Psalms, and then he ends. But at the end of the day, God, you are good.
Yep.
I feel like I do have a rhythm where it's like, God, oh my gosh, I need, oh God, help me, God, you got to come through, and then I'm like, after I've done, you just said this hard breathing, and then you're just like. But God, you are so good.
Yep.
You are so great. And really, like this thing that I'm worried about, I know I shouldn't be. And God, this is I'm carrying things that you never asked me to carry. And so, God, I'm going to release those to you. And so I think whatever your highs and lows have been as you think about your week, our invitation to you, as Josh said, 99% of prayer, just showing up.
Yep.
Show up with God. Bring those things to Him.
The highs and the lows.
The highs and the lows.
Yes, the highs
and
and
allow
the
Him to
lows.
do greater things in and through your life.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for another episode of the Beyond Sunday podcast. We cannot wait to be with you again soon. But until then, happy Wednesday.
Happy
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Take care.
Can you sing it?
No, there's no
why
Happy
was I
Wednesday
about to
song.
sing Happy Birthday?
No, there's no Happy Wednesday.
to you.
Yeah, no, that's bad.
I literally don't
You know
know
what
why I
does
came
have a
up.
theme song?
What?
The NFL.
Yes.
Ba-da-dun,
She would
da-da-dun.
know.
Ba-da-dun,
Yeah, you would.
Da-da-dun.